Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of Administrators at the City of Casey, and I'd like to welcome you to our council meeting of the 16th of April. I'd like to start with introductions this afternoon. Firstly, my colleague administrators, Mr Miguel Belmar.
Good afternoon.
And Cameron Boardman.
Good afternoon, Chair.
And I'd like to also welcome a number of our senior officers, starting with our Chief Executive Officer, Glenn Patterson, James Collins, Director, City Planning and Infrastructure, Jen Bednar, Director, Customer and Corporate Services, Steve Coldham, Director, Community Life, and we're supported this afternoon by Nicole Road in Governance and Tom Conroy AV and his team over there. And I also welcome a number of other staff from Council who are here present this afternoon. Statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities, and pays respect and their rich culture, and pays respect to the elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community story. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. Move to item 2, the confirmation of minutes, and we have minutes to be confirmed of the meeting held on the 19th of March. I seek a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes of this meeting.
I'll move those.
Thank you, Mr Belmar.
Seconded, Chair. Seconded
by Mr Boardman. All in favour? Carried. Item 3 is declaration of interests. I've considered my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and have no interests to declare. Do any council officers or my fellow administrators have any items to declare? And I do note that Mr Coldman has raised, just by way of note, that he's a member of the Library Board. And Mr Belmar?
Yes, I also come under that note that I'm also a member of the Library Board.
Thank you. So it's just to note that. Any other conflicts to declare?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I have a direct interest in item 5.5 too.
Thank you. We'll also note that. Thank you. We now move to public question time. There are a number of public questions submitted through Council's website for this afternoon's meeting, and I'll hand over to our Chief Executive Officer who will lead us through the questions.
Thank you, Chair. The first question relates to advocacy regarding mobile phone access. And the question is, given that Clyde and Clyde North are experiencing significant growth in population, what action has the Casey Council undertaken to advocate for improved mobile coverage? And that question is asked by Rob Ward, and Mr Collins will respond to that question.
The provision and upgrade of telecommunication services is being facilitated through the State Government's Connecting Victoria program, which seeks priority rollout of mobile towers and improved connectivity throughout the state. The City of Casey is working in partnership with the state and several telecommunication service providers in addressing infrastructure and servicing gaps experienced throughout the municipality, in particular Clyde and Clyde North. The delivery of this service remains the responsibility of the State Government. However, Casey will continue to facilitate and assist in this matter where possible. A total of 2 mobile towers in Clyde and 4 mobile towers in Clyde North are already occurring through the Connecting Victoria program, with several of these towers already being delivered or having received recent approvals before construction.
The second question is from Debbie Gascard regarding disability parking at Bunjil Place. How come there is no appropriate disability parking at Bunjil Place? The car park to the library is much too far for those with disability accessibility issues. I attended Bunjil recently and was told that employees were parking underground when I was told last time that it was reserved for disability parking spaces. I would like to see more discussion and action around disability parking for future meetings? And again, Mr Collins will respond to that question.
Recognising the need to provide priority parking for accessible permit holders, Council has allocated 31 accessible spaces within the Bunjil Place precinct. Of the 31 accessible spaces, 17 are located directly opposite Bunjil Place and are located immediately adjacent to the two zebra crossings across Patrick Northeast Drive and in close proximity to the main entrance of Bunjil Place. An integral feature of the Bunjil Place design is the creation of a pedestrian plaza area immediately outside the building. This area unfortunately precludes vehicles from parking immediately adjacent to the building entrance. Bunjil Place has a basement car park that is used to park council fleet vehicles. Council officers have previously investigated an option to alter the drop-off pickup zones on the south side of Patrick Northeast Drive for accessible parking bays. However, this concluded that the layout and width of the parking bays does not comply with the relevant Australian standards for accessible parking spaces. This means Council is unable to retrofit legally compliant accessible parking spaces on the south side of Patrick Northeast Drive. Council is continually monitoring usage and responding to requests for appropriate allocations of accessible parking. There are a number of priority actions identified in our new Disability Inclusion Action Plan around accessible parking, and the community will have ongoing opportunities to provide feedback via the Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Group.
The next question relates to Hardies Road and Linsell Boulevard, and the question is submitted by Robert Ward. This intersection was completed 6 months ago. Traffic lights and intersection lighting are still being powered by rented equipment, and I understand this is due to broken promises from AusNet. What is the cost of this delay and who is bearing the cost? And again, Mr Collins will respond.
AusNet advised Council of electrical plan compliance for the Hardies Road Linsell Boulevard intersection in early February. Subsequently, Council's roadworks contractor has been liaising with the Department of Transport and Planning to approve a traffic management plan for a 40-kilometre speed restriction while electrical safety testing and auditing is undertaken. This is a requirement before the street lighting and signals are connected to the power grid. The Department of Transport and Planning are reluctant to approve the speed reduction at this time due to the multiple transport projects currently underway in the area. These projects have seen a significant increase to traffic in the Clyde area. Council will proceed with safety testing and auditing following DTP approval, allowing signals to be connected to the grid. While Council awaits this approval, it is currently bearing the cost of 4 light towers and a generator to allow the intersection to be operational.
The next question is submitted by Matthew Lynn relating to homelessness and rough sleeping. What are Council's official plans to increase affordable housing and end rough sleeping, and how is this coordinated with others, including nearby councils? And Mr Colden will respond.
Thank you. Council's efforts to increase affordable housing are enshrined within the Casey Affordable Housing Strategy 20 to 24 and the associated action plan, which is currently under review. Council is committed to leading and influencing change and directly contributing to the increase of affordable housing supply in the city through advocacy, partnerships and through facilitating affordable housing. Council maintains a register of people sleeping rough or at risk of homelessness and connects with them and relevant departments and organisations to support access to services. To foster partnerships and to coordinate with other councils and organisations working in the sector and at the local level, Casey coordinates the Casey Homelessness and Social Inclusion Network and participates in a regional homelessness and social housing charter to address the urgent need for increased housing and more effective, integrated and supported homelessness service supports.
The next question is also submitted by Matthew Lynn on the same subject of homelessness and rough sleeping. Does Council know how many people are sleeping rough across the LGA, and how is Council collecting this vital health information? And again, Mr Colden will respond.
So Council uses a variety of data sources to monitor homelessness and the number of people sleeping rough within the city. This includes internal registers of notifications, ABS data, and a network of homelessness services that provide data on service provision. In 2021, census data indicated that around 1,852 people in Casey were experiencing homelessness or marginally housed.
The next question is from Kasuni Mendes about the Golf Links Road, Narre Warren Cranbourne Road intersection. With yet another accident at the intersection of Golflinks Road and Narre Cranbourne Road on Sunday, has Council undertaken a traffic report at this intersection and or lobbied for a set of traffic lights? Mr Collins will respond to that question.
Council is aware of community concerns regarding congestion and safety at the intersection of Narre Cranbourne Road and Golflinks Road. Over recent years, we have advocated to the Department of Transport and Planning seeking an upgrade to intersections along this section of Narre Cranbourne Road, including the intersections with Golflinks Road, Fleetwood Drive and Norfolk Drive. Fleetwood Drive and Golflinks Road have similar crash profiles, with Fleetwood Drive carrying the most traffic. The Department of Transport and Planning have confirmed that there is no current funding allocated for the upgrade of Narre Cranbourne Road at Golflinks Road, and there is no approved funding for the other two intersections. Council will continue to advocate to the Department of Transport and Planning for safety improvements at these intersections, noting that the priority for signalisation will be at Fleetwood Drive. Due to the increasing crash history, some turn movements may need to be removed at Golflinks Road. Residents continue to have the option to use the traffic signals at Saxonwood Drive to access Narre Cranbourne Road.
The next question is from Colin Hampton about parking. Following from last meeting's response, seeing that the same trucks have been parking there for the last 2 years between 4 p.m. and 6 a.m, also 24 hours a day over the weekend, how many infringements have been issued? There is also a vehicle parked on a nature strip in close proximity to where I reside, which has been there for the last 18 months in contravention of your local law. How many infringements have been issued and what has happened to community consultation? Mr Colden will respond.
Thank you. In the past month, Council's parking officers have conducted 3 patrols out of hours in the vicinity of this street. The caravan referenced in last month's public questions has now been moved, with officers issuing about 5 infringements to trucks parked illegally. Council has received no complaints of nature strip parking in this street in the past month and will continue to monitor this area.
The next question is submitted by Anthony Cheeseman about the Lart Central Social Enterprise Cafe, Catering and Florist lease termination. Could Council advise what is the driver behind driving out of Cranbourne, one of the most disadvantaged areas in Casey, a Social Traders Australia certified social enterprise that provides training, employment and participation opportunities for locals who have mental health challenges and disabilities, while continuing to provide tenancy in the same building to Lendlease, a multi-billion-dollar commercial enterprise, until the end of January 2025? Mr Collins will respond to that question.
At the March 19, 2024 Council meeting, Council resolved to decommission the administration building located at 65 Berwick Cranbourne Road, Cranbourne East, because it is at the end of its asset life. This resolution is in alignment with the decision made at the April 23 Council meeting, which endorsed a strategic review of the administration building to assess retaining or decommissioning this site. Existing tenants of the admin building who are currently operating with a lease agreement that is due to expire on or prior to the 30th of June 2024 have now been informed that their lease will not be renewed or extended beyond this date. The term of the lease for Lart Central expired on the 31st of October 2023. Lart Cafe is currently occupying the premises on a month-by-month basis. The Lart Central lease, which commenced in November 2018, noted there would be no further option to renew beyond the natural term of the lease end. A notice to vacate is therefore considered an appropriate response by Council, who is in this instance has provided notice in excess of 1 month's requirement. Further to the exit of Lart and other impacted tenants, work will commence immediately to salvage fittings, close off relevant utility connections and permanently start decommissioning the building. Decommissioning of this building responds to the urban design framework adopted by Council in 2019 and indicates the building will be demolished to ensure construction of an interconnecting road within the precinct. Officers have met on several occasions with the business owners to support them in transitioning to a new premise. A decision was made to accommodate Lendlease within the admin building to support the construction of the adjacent community hospital. The community hospital has been a priority for Council as it is seen as a critical infrastructure for Cranbourne and Casey more broadly. There were limited options to accommodate Lendlease within the precinct, so Council entered into a short-term temporary lease at commercial rates, with Lendlease responsible for all costs.
And the final question is also from Anthony Cheeseman about the Cranbourne Community Hub and Admin Building. Council is proposing to spend over $40 million unfunded on a controversial new community hub in Cranbourne, yet it is treating community organisations with disdain as it summarily issues eviction notices to organisations at the Cranbourne Administration Building. The community consultation process for the proposed hub is flawed, and there has been minimal consultation with existing admin building tenants, including Lart Central. Will Council now put both projects on hold until a truly representative council is elected later this year? And again, Mr Collins will answer. Thank you.
The existing tenants of the admin building had the opportunity to provide a submission in response to the proposed Cranbourne Hub project during May 2023, along with the broader community. Over 200 members of the community, including admin building tenants, were engaged with, and over 380 pieces of individual feedback were documented from both verbal and written submissions received. At the council meeting on the 19th of March 2024, council endorsed progressing work to plan for a proposed Cranbourne Hub and to implement a detailed co-design process with specific community partners. Members of the community will have the opportunity to participate in this process alongside key stakeholders and will be selected through an expression of interest process. The co-design process will allow for robust and detailed exploration of the Cranbourne Hub design and operational requirements, including of visual representations of the built form and updated cost estimate. The building elevations, artist impressions and cost estimate of the proposed Cranbourne Hub will then be available for extensive community engagement so that the community have full understanding of both cost and benefits of this project. This is currently planned for early 2025. The timing is to deliberate to allow the incoming elected councillors adequate time to understand the full scope of the project prior to any financial commitment to deliver the Cranbourne Hub. The administration building is at the end of its life, and decommissioning will commence progressively to reduce council's ongoing maintenance liabilities.
Thank you, Mr Patterson. We now move on to officer reports, of which there are 8. So I'm moving to page 4 of the hard copy agenda this afternoon, to item 5.1, which is corporate suite of documents endorsement for public exhibition. And before I seek a mover and a seconder, I'd just like to make some introductory comments with respect to what we are dealing with here this afternoon. In many ways, it is the most important of the council reports and decisions for the year. So we have a number of key draft strategic documents to endorse for public exhibition today, and they include the draft budget report, which includes the draft budget 24-25 and draft capital works program 24-25, the draft council plan 2021-25, year 4 review, draft annual action plan 24-25, draft financial plan 24-25 to 33-34, and the draft schedule of fees and charges for this year as well. So the draft budget this year totals $567.4 million, including a $460.1 million operational budget and a $107.3 million capital works program. So that demonstrates the sizable nature of the operation here at the City of Casey, being one of the largest municipalities in Victoria. This budget prioritises the delivery of crucial services across the City of Casey and brings to life the long-term Community Vision 2031, Council Plan 21-25 and the 10-year financial plan. And as we approach this being the last year of the Council Plan, the focus is on the priorities that are including open space and recreation, climate change in our environment, transport and infrastructure and safety. And during the course of this year, there will be consultation and discussion with the community in planning for the next community vision, the next council plan. It is a tight financial environment that we're working in. As many of our community would understand, the state government has an imposed rate cap on local government in Victoria, and that rate cap this year is 2.75%. And what we do know is that so many of our costs are far in excess of that. So it is a very challenging financial environment that we're working in, particularly in a growing community and with the demands for infrastructure within this community. So with that as introductory comments, I'd now seek a mover and a seconder for the recommendation on page 4.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder.
Seconder, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your opening statement. In 2024-25, we're looking forward to implementing our Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan, including cultural awareness training for staff, engagement with experts to utilise cultural knowledge, and consultation with local traditional owners on the development of a cultural learning strategy. As a major employer in the municipality, we acknowledge the need to lead by example when it comes to being a safe, inclusive and affirming employer for the LGBTIQA+ community. Over the next 12 months, we are committed to implementing a number of inclusive workplace practices in areas such as inclusive training, recruitment and onboarding. In the 2024-2025 year, there are also a number of other programs to be rolled out, including the Sport for All program, aimed at educating and guiding sports clubs to be inclusive and welcoming to those people that identify as having a disability. We'll also be supporting a council induction program in the lead up to the October 2024 election to help achieve the best possible democratic representation of the Casey community. In 2024-25, our Capital Works program focuses on renewing and maintaining our existing assets while we carefully plan for new infrastructure that supports the growing community. And I note that in the next 10 years, the community is expected to grow to over 500,000 residents, and we're growing at the rate of over 5,000 new children being born per year. So this is absolutely a growing community. That program in our Capital Works program includes over $15 million towards road projects, just over $47 million towards recreational, leisure and community facilities, $8.9 million towards parks, open space and streetscapes, and further monies towards the improvement of footpaths and cycleways. We're also, with respect to specific programs and some of the programs that we have mentioned at the council meetings in the past, we're looking at the renewal of the 15-metre pool at Doveton, and also further work being done at Springleaf Recreation Reserve in Clyde North, the upgrade of the Tooradin Recreation Reserve Pavilion, and improvements to Tyab Tooradin Road between South Boundary Road and Baxter Tooradin Road in Pearcedale. Once we've considered the documents this afternoon, these will be put forward for public exhibition, which will commence on Wednesday the 17th of April to conclude on Wednesday the 8th of May. And I encourage all members of the community to access the various platforms that we have to be able to contribute with their comments and their views as to the documents that we are putting forward on public exhibition tonight. Following the exhibition phase, all submissions will be heard at a special council meeting on Tuesday the 28th of May, prior to the adoption of a suite of strategic documents at a further council meeting on Tuesday the 18th of June. And picking up on your opening comments, Chair, that meeting on the 18th of June is obviously really one of the most important meetings we have all year, and that's where we adopt the budget and the suite of documents. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, I don't need to elaborate in any great detail further to your remarks and to Mr Belmar's remarks. We are releasing or endorsing the release of these documents for public consultation. I thought it appropriate, considering that this is the last budget annual plan, financial plan that ourselves as administrators will decide upon and resolve during our term of administration, and it also coincides with the period on when the council itself, post the October elections, transitions back to an elected council.
But what may be of interest to the community is our role in developing the council plan, which through the strategic objectives that we have set, that provides the clarity, the expectations and the objectives to the organisation as a whole to achieve all of the actions and innovations and initiatives that have been spelled out by my colleagues, is really quite a significant strategic piece of work in its own right, and one that we have been indelibly and comprehensively involved in, not just this year but past financial years, and it is probably, as you've alluded to, the most significant thing that we do as administrators. But our 7 strategic objectives around developing sustainable infrastructure and activated places, growing Casey's current emerging sectors, fostering environmentally sustainable practices and work towards being climate ready, and we'll make some further comments of that in other agenda items in this council meeting, advocate to the state and federal governments for key service infrastructure delivery, which is something that we have been deliberately targeted on a number of the significant capital works projects that currently are under development within the municipality and forecast to be commenced development in the future. And also looking at how we are creating resilience, active and connected communities through some of the community service provision elements that the council provides, and ensuring that we do that to meet community expectations, but also to provide evolutionary standards to meet future expectations. But the 2 most critical elements from our role, Chair, that we do as administrators see ourselves as having the most contribution to, the strategic objective number 6 around ensuring good governance and transparent decision making, and I'll make some more significant comments again at a later agenda items, but critically creating an adaptable, innovative, financially sustainable organisation that delivers a maximum community benefit. And Chair, you've made comments around the rate cap environment, which is an issue that affects every municipality, and as a large municipality with a large workforce and a large provision of service delivery, and the significant cost concerns and challenges that many suppliers to this organisation and other private sector entities are currently confronted with, that by itself creates some significant environmental challenges that we have to be conscious of, and we have to adapt ourselves and our planning and our financial management plan accordingly. We're also existing in not just an evolutionary CPI environment, but also an evolutionary IR environment. We are a large employer, probably the largest employer in the municipality. There is challenges in the IR environment from enterprise bargaining agreements that are now becoming mainstream for state government employees to other employees that are affected by awards in some of our service areas, which we do have to take into consideration. So setting the strategic objectives, looking at how that impacts upon the organisation and its implementation of the actions, but taking the very firm overview of achieving good governance principles and creating a sustainable financial organisation to meet community objectives has been our forefront principle in developing these suite of corporate documents and the budget for the next financial year. When we come to the 18 June council meeting, Chair, I'll take the opportunity to go into a lot more detail around our financial plan and the budget and some of these specific considerations, but I thought that context around our involvement in setting our expectations and ensuring the organisation has clarity and certainty around implementing plans commensurate with those expectations was an important point to make, but I'm very pleased to support the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Now move to page 279, item 2 on this afternoon's agenda, and that's the early years service review. And I would like to just comment at the outset that this has been a very significant piece of work within the organisation in response to a changing policy environment at the state government level, and the level of dedication and engagement of staff within the organisation has been exemplary. So I'm very, very pleased to see this recommendation backed up by a very professional level of work that's been undertaken. So with those comments, I'll seek a mover and a seconder.
I will move the recommendation as put, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, happy to second the motion.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
And Chair, your remarks I fully endorse. it is an enormous amount of work that has been ongoing for several months now, and commendably, this isn't a piece of work which ourselves administrators have been intricately involved in, not just through, again, setting the strategic expectations and looking at the change in the legislative and policy context and how that affects the organisations, but providing the sensibilities around the liaison and the advice where necessary to really come up with what we think is in the community's long-term best interest. It really is a unique situation for Casey that when we do citizenship ceremonies, for example, we always reference that around about 100 families per week move into this municipality. Not all are new citizens, of course, but if you're thinking roughly of around average of 5,000 new families a year, many of which would have school and kindergarten-aged children, there's an enormous expectation for what future infrastructure and early years learning service provision looks like, in addition to all of the other challenges that would impact upon the broader education sector as a whole. This is a real issue that affects this municipality, uniquely because of the structure of the municipality and because of the demographical change and growth in the municipality, but it is something where we have to take a very future-focused view of our decision-making, not just to meet the current demand, but to really look at what those future expectations and demand statistics are. We've made it very clear that in only 11 short years, we will require an additional 5,800 kindergarten places in this municipality. It's not a long time away. And that would have occurred irrespective of what the policy change in 2022 was. And so the first lens we needed to look at is how do we fulfil not just the existing demand, but that significant demand, which is almost a doubling of what the current provision is at the moment. But we extrapolate that demand expectation by virtue of what happened in 2022 through the Best Start, Best Life reforms, where the state government introduced a $12 billion, or a $14 billion program, I should say, to provide free kinder for 3 and 4-year-olds from the start of 2023, to provide 4-year-old kindergarten to transition to pre-prep, including increasing to a universal 30-hour per week program of play-based learning for 4-year-old children, and also to providing an increase to 15 hours per week to the state by 2029 to Victorian children who would be attending 3-year-old kindergarten. So it's a bit of a perfect storm, Chair, that we have that forecast service level expectation through the growth that the municipality was going to be confronted with, irrespective of the policy change, and then on top of that we've got the policy change that requires the service delivery to be exceeded quite substantially. The way we tackled this was to look at every single option, was to look at every option from what is our role as an infrastructure provider, what is our role as providing a central registry for enrolments, what is our role as directly employing the teaching staff, what is our role to build future infrastructure that potentially could be operated by private sector entities, and then to potentially partner with private sector entities in their own right to look at how a hybrid or a conjoined model might look like. Throughout this process and the extraordinary and comprehensive work that council officers led by Bronwyn and Saffron has undertaken, we did not leave any option or alternative untested, unevaluated and comprehensively assessed. And by going through this and looking at the service delivery issues, meeting future growth expectations and the economic factors, we've decided upon what we think comprehensively proposed the recommendation tonight as the best model, which is that we will only build kindergartens and the infrastructure for the population growth that will be based on the demands as I've articulated under the Best Start, Best Life reform. We will endorse the recommendation to continue to provide kindergarten services within the current kindergarten workforce capacity, not to increase the workforce in response to the Best Start, Best Life reform, but within the additional capacity. We will endorse the handing back of the management of the Southern Cross and Botanic Ridge kindergartens, which are currently located both on school sites, to the Department of Education, and we have commenced that process by way of socialisation with the Department of Education with a view to finalising that as the earliest opportunity. And we do endorse the development of advocacy plan to support our position, as it is to be the responsibility to meet the expectations of the early years sector to respond to the policy reforms as I have articulated. There is some significant costs to council, both by virtue of infrastructure and also by virtue of the staffing costs. We currently employ 276 full-time equivalent positions over these services. That they are not just teaching or child educating support officers. There's administration, there's coordination, there's leadership, there's administrative support. It is a significant component of our overall service delivery, and one which the community understands and accepts very well. The other aspect that I need to make is that if we were going to make any substantial change to the way council provided this service, there was a significant notification period with the Department of Education of 18 months. And considering where we are in our tenure and the remarks I made in the previous agenda item, we would not have necessarily been as far down that notification period to meet any substantial change that would warrant a different approach than what I've articulated tonight. And that has to be seen as a very significant part of our overall decision making. So we understand that this is a valuable community service. The community consultation was quite clear insofar as how parents, early child educators and the broader community and other stakeholders appreciate this level of service and the uniqueness of the Casey offering. We fully understand that to meet our future infrastructure and enrolment requirements, there needs to be further investment, not just in the infrastructure, but also in the staffing aspects. And we also understand the changing policy environment, which does have significant changes to deliverables around the number of hours that 3- and 4-year-old kindergarten students will receive by 2029, as I have articulated. But by making this decision, we're front-ending our commitment to continuing to provide this service, but also ensuring that there is a balance between what currently exists, what the future needs are, and the infrastructure accordingly meets those requirements overall. So again, I just place on the record, endorsing your introductory remarks, Chair, that it has been an extraordinarily comprehensive exercise, this one that I stress we have been intricately involved in. And I really do firmly place on the record my appreciation to everyone and the council officers who's been involved in this, and Steve and your team and Bronwyn, as I've mentioned. There's no doubt that this is a decision that is in the best interest of the community. It meets all of the financial infrastructure and policy objectives, and one that overwhelmingly should give confidence and certainty to the Casey community as a whole.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmont.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mr Boardman for those opening remarks, which have been very comprehensive and extensive. In seconding this motion, I simply want to add some short remarks. I want to confirm the incredible amount of work that has been done by council staff in ensuring that we have been furnished with all the necessary information, and it's really been a journey understanding this area of council work and understanding the pressures that it faces on a number of levels, but also the opportunities that exist both within the areas of the strong role that Casey has in the demand by the community for an ongoing service, and the opportunities that exist for council to remain involved, but also to partner with providers who see Casey as an area where their offering will have a strong attraction for the community. Reflecting on the officer's report tonight, I note that we have been given all the material we need to be comfortable in and satisfied in the decision we're reaching tonight with respect to the economic requirements or the economic pressures and the pressures that are created by policy, which, to be absolutely clear, we absolutely support with respect to the importance of the early years of education and the foundation that they provide for later success in school. With those comments, I'm happy to second the motion and note finally the fourth part of the recommendation that we're endorsing tonight, and that is endorsing the development of an advocacy plan to support its best position, that is the responsibility of the early years sector. And I want to just finish on that point, which is that apart from the work that we are continuing to do in this sector, we're also going to embark on that ongoing advocacy work, and I think that's an important takeaway from the endorsing that we're doing tonight. And as I said, with those comments, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmer. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.3, the transition of connected libraries to a beneficial enterprise. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation?
Yes, I will move this.
Thank you, Mr Belmer. Seconder?
Seconder, Chair.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmer.
Thank you, Chair. As noted in an earlier part of this meeting, I declared that I'm a member of the board of Connected Libraries, of the Cardinia Library Corporation, trading as Connected Libraries. The recommendation that we are moving tonight is part of the continuing work that is being done by Council to comply with the Local Government Act 2020, which introduced reforms which require that libraries, to be in compliance with the Act, undertake work to either be wound up by July 2030 and or to transition to a compliant entity as referred to under that Act. And that particular organisation is a beneficial enterprise. So the work that the motion we're passing tonight continues that work that we've been undertaking at our library and that we've been undertaking here at Council to ensure compliance with that legislation. Those steps have included the work that has occurred over the last few years, where we dissolved our previous agreement with Cardinia Council. We continue in our previous legal framework, but with only one member. And what we're doing through this motion we're passing tonight is looking into a future where we are creating a beneficial enterprise and creating in such a way so that it will be available and set up in such a way that in future, with an appropriate partner, we'll be able to have an organisation that is ready to be available to, if appropriate, partner with other municipalities offering library services. Noting in the Council papers the next steps that are going to be taken based on the legal advice we've obtained, just to review the current regional library agreement, to develop a draft constitution for the new corporate entity to be endorsed by Council. So we'll continue to be involved in this work, to register the new corporate entity with ASIC, and that registration will also ensure that we're able to register as a charity with the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission, which will be an important step that we'll be able to take. And then finally, to take the steps of transferring library operations to a new company and to wind up the Library Corporation. And as I said in the outset, we have to do that by July 2030. So we're certainly doing that well ahead of time in terms of this work that is required. I want to thank the members of staff who have assisted for a number of years now in getting us to this place where we're able to take these steps. And I note that this will continue after my term of office has ended, and it's been fantastic to be part of the Library Corporation at a time when we are undergoing this change, and to ensure that we are set for the future to continue to provide a great library service for the City of Casey.
Thank you, Mr Belmer. Mr Boardman.
Chair, again, another enormous piece of work. We were, I guess, hoping that one day we wouldn't be talking about libraries. at council meetings, but we're not quite there yet. This is yet another administrative and procedural change we need to go through. And as you just alluded to, Mr Belmar, there will be further changes. I do note that as part of this transition, through my role as a member of the Audit and Risk Committee, the Victorian Auditor General's Office has raised an issue with us around the controlled nature of the Library Corporation, whether or not we can present consolidated account or standalone accounts. There are still some administrative aspects that we need to further consider. I may have a contrary view to Vago's office, but that may or may not be the case. So I just note that this is still part of an evolutionary process to ensure that we do meet the LGA's requirement under this particular structure. And I do note, Mr Belmar, your role in the corporation and the stewardship and leadership you're providing to ensure that we do meet all of our statutory obligations. And thank you for that. And furthermore, Chair, that as I've alluded to, there is still a little bit of this to play out in the future. So we will deal with this on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. The library service is amongst the most loved of the services that the council provides to the community, and highly utilised and highly valuable right across all ages and stages. And this is really something in the background. What I'm really pleased to have observed during some of the changes that have occurred is the independent chair and independent member of the library board has really, I think, taken us in a new direction, and I'm delighted with the contribution that the board have made to the relevance and connection of the library to council and its services ongoing. I think it will remain, irrespective of how people are attached to books, etc. It is going to remain a most vital service, and so this is really just an administrative shift in the background which will be worked through. But I think the important shift that we've made is particularly the front and centre nature of the library as a key service within the Casey community, and to that end I do commend the Chief Executive Officer Beth Lupino and her team for the work that they've done in adjusting to these new changes. With that, I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.4, curbside policy charge exempt services. Is there a mover for item 5.4?
Chair, I'll move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, I invite you to speak to item 5.4.
Chair, it's an amendment to the curbside collection policy, which is attached as a whole document at agenda item 5.4.1. There are two key changes to the policy. One is the removal of the additional bin that's currently applicable to where households that declare that they have more than 6 permanent residents per household is entitled currently to a free additional bin. And then looking at the medical conditions exemptions, whereby the key change there is that the requirement for an additional bin due to medical exemption for additional medical waste and the like will need to be provided in writing by a medical practitioner. This is part of ongoing review of council services. We've spoken many times in the past of reforms to curbside waste management and also overall collection and transfer and management as a whole. We do acknowledge that there is a financial hardship policy that continued to be utilised by genuinely affected members of the community, but as part of this particular review, it's currently been identified that there are 1,200 services under the 6 per person household, if I briefly surmise it as that, that currently does cost a significant amount to the council. And unfortunately, the review did identify that there is some significant misuse of that particular policy. It is a very difficult policy to enforce and to obtain certification and genuine analysis of or confirmation of that the households in question do have 6 or more permanent occupants, and therefore it has been decided that a discontinuation of that as of right is appropriate, albeit that if there is financial hardship or the medical reasons that I have stipulated, then a household can apply for an additional bin under the adopted and revised policy. So, Chair, they're the two key changes. It is administrative procedure, but it is to ensure that there is an equitable approach across the entire municipality, noting that this is a part of the service delivery for the council where the costs are increasing substantially and will continue to increase. And we have discussed the details and the rationale and reasoning behind that many times at past council meetings, and we will discuss it at future council meetings undoubtedly. So with those comments, I'll move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. It's a procedural motion in some respects, but it also has solid policy reasons. I note the comments of Mr Boardman that these are the types of policies that need continuous review. I've considered the material and note that the original rationale for a second bin for more than 6 in a household was one that required review, and that review has been undertaken, and as a result of that review, that exemption is no longer intended to apply, but there will be a hardship provision that will continue that can be utilised, and in relation to medical conditions, again, that is a policy that was appropriate to review. I want to note finally that these are the sorts of policies that can over time grow to a degree which, as we see from the papers here, have an annual cost of over $100,000 a year in growth, and those are the sorts of budgetary implications that need to be kept an eye on, and this is this policy tonight that we're adopting is part of that continual review. And with those comments, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. I now move to item 5.5, which is the minutes of the CEO Employment and Remuneration Committee, looking at page 300 of the agenda. Do I have a mover and a seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Seconder?
Second the recommendation, Chair.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. In accordance with the Local Government Act, we are required to meet on an ongoing basis with the CEO and to record those meetings. I want to confirm that that meeting once again occurred. I want to thank the CEO for his Mr Patterson for his continuing work and the manner in which he always engages with us as a panel. I want to note that we will have one more of these meetings with him in August as we come to the conclusion of our term. It's a useful exercise to be able to meet in such a forum and to ensure that we're able to always have good and open communication with the CEO. And with those comments, and again thanking him for the way in which he leads this organisation, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, likewise, I can confirm my attendance at the Employment and Remuneration Committee, which we do manage through a significant performance management framework whereby we seek responses from the CEO against the achievements and the objectives of the council plan and those strategic indicators that I articulated at a previous agenda item tonight. It is a significantly comprehensive process, one where we do place a high level of rigour around Mr Patterson's responses and also ensuring that we provide necessary feedback, coaching, mentoring, and further clarify and articulate our expectations of his role and how he's leading the organisation. There is a comprehensive confidential attachment, which understandable is confidential to circumstances because of its very nature. But I do echo Mr Belmar's comments, Chair, that I do thank the CEO for the leadership that he is providing the organisation and the achievements that through his leadership the entire organisation is making, a number of which we've discussed at this council meeting, and certainly many achievements we'll continue to discuss at future council meetings, and thank him again for the way that he has demonstrated his professionalism, acumen and genuine commitment to the Casey community and the organisation as a whole.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'd also like to add a few comments and to note that this committee is led by an independent chair that works with the three of us in oversighting the performance of the CEO, that being Mr Patterson. We've now worked with Mr Patterson for, 5 years nearly, and I think we have most certainly agreed that the leadership of the organisation is to a very high standard, supported by a group of executives that are very committed to the organisation, and managers and coordinators and team leaders and staff beyond that. But we do want to note the leadership role that Mr Glenn Patterson plays in the organisation, and thank him for his ongoing commitment and dedication. With that, I will seek a endorsement of that motion. I'm trying to think where I'm going. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.6 is the endorsement of corporate governance documents, and there are a range of documents in the attachment, and I will leave it to the mover and seconder to explain this. Do I have a mover?
I will move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second it.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, good luck.
Chair, I want to take a little bit of time to go through what's an extensive suite of corporate documents, specifically the updated and amendments to the council expense policy, councillor gift policy, unreasonable complaint conduct policy, and the Building Works Code of Practice, which we are adopting tonight, and then also looking towards the revised changes on the governance rules, which we are endorsing for a period of 4 weeks of public consultation. My remarks are very much targeted at individuals who are considering standing for council in October, and ultimately those who will be successful. Because these corporate suite of documents are effectively going to be your Bible. These are your SOPs. These documents provide significant and comprehensive articulation of the expected behaviours, the procedural elements insofar as your conduct as a councillor within this organisation, not just through your professional approach, but how you conduct yourself in council meetings, pre-meetings, briefings, interactions with staff, and also to look at where, if and hopefully the rare event that there are disputes, on how those disputes are managed and ultimately resolved. As part of our role, Chair, we are working with the organisation to develop a comprehensive councillor induction program to set the expectations of those who ultimately are successful in their quest for election in October around not just these documents, but a range of other documents, including the Local Government Act, but also, importantly, the full report from the Independent Broad-Based Anti-Corruption Commission Operation Sandons Review. Every successful councillor candidate will receive that report in addition to these documents, and the expectation that, irrespective of the length and the comprehensive nature of these documents, that they will read every single word. Because these, as I said, really set the tone of the expectation of what happens once we depart this place. And it may come across as somewhat patronising, or even in some extents ironically belittling, but the reality is that the Operation Sandon report highlighted quite detailedly and comprehensively appalling behaviour, significant lapses in professionalism and conduct issues, and ultimately the nature in which the previous council was dismissed was without questionably justified through the findings of that report. And what we have done, particularly with the governance rules, very unique to the council situation, and it starts through a specific articulation at clause 19, which is on page 365 of the council agenda is to incorporate a number of those recommendations that came out of the Operation Standard report into the governance rules. Now, we do note that there was local government of Victoria issued a consultation paper earlier this year on the 31st of January. It was titled Local Government Reforms Paper 2024. It did provide an overview of the proposed reforms to strengthen council leadership capability and councillor conduct. It did provide an overview of the reforms to improve early intervention and effective dispute resolution, and also provide an overview to strengthen oversight mechanisms. It did seek consultation, and that proposed process has concluded, but it is noted, and we made this point very comprehensively in our submission to that process, that the model governance rules were not included as part of that consultation paper, irrespective that they were a key recommendation that came out of Operation Sandon. So ourselves as administrators have taken the lead to incorporate what those key recommendations were into our model governance rules as a first step opportunity to really hopefully set the tone of what the expectation of a future council is. And if I could just reference clause 19, because I think this is a pretty critical change to the governance rules that does address a number of the findings within Operation Sandons. And this goes to the aspect of pre-council meetings. Pre-council meetings are not an opportunity to caucus, to seek some degree of trade-offs, to look at potential decision-making outcomes, to look at where favours and kickbacks or any other type of interactions between individuals. They are briefings. They are exactly as they should be, an opportunity for council officers, based upon the council plan, based upon all of those strategic framework aspects that I've articulated previously, to report progress against what those specific actions, objectives, interventions are. It's an opportunity for councillors to be informed, to ask questions, to seek feedback, and to inform themselves so that they can make their decisions accordingly. And this is a pretty critical point, because the role of the councillor is to make decisions based upon the information that they have received, using their own judgment, using their own inquisitive abilities, but also to ensure that they are necessarily informed to make the decision in the best interest of the council and the municipality as a whole. And the behaviour and the conduct and the clear examples that the Operation Sandon final report showed was that that was not what was happening in this organisation. This unfortunate situation at the pre-council meeting was somewhat of a little empire-building exercise where ongoing caucusing was occurring and almost fait accomplis were occurring before anyone came into this council chamber. So it made it very clear, articulating the role and the expectations around the key interactions before a council meeting, particularly with the staff, the Chief Executive Officer and the executives, and how councillor conduct and behaviours must be met. It is just one example of the specific requirements that we have ourselves embedded into these governance rules, consistent with those recommendations under Operation Sandon. So whilst we are endorsing changes to the policies that I've mentioned, it is the governance rules which are the critical document. We are putting it out for public consultation for those council candidate aspirants who would like to be sitting in this chair post-October. Read it, give us your feedback, tell us what else we need to incorporate, and if you don't like it, tell us why you don't like it, and we will respond, because we will adopt this formally at a future council meeting, but do it along the lines of having a look at what the findings, the recommendations, and those key outtakes from the Operation Sandon report is, because that is going to be a critical document for the future council here at Casey. So with those comments, Chair, I will adopt the recommendation as put, endorsing the policies that we have all been significantly involved in the assessment and providing our feedback on to this date. And also, as I've said, to seek further public consultation on the model governance rules, which we, as an organisation, believe we are uniquely placed to strengthen, to be consistent with the Sandon recommendations, and to also really, in quite significant, a steadfast environment, set the expectations and standards for future elected council.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. This motion tonight recommends the adoption of a number of policies and it has been addressed by Mr Boardman, puts out to public consultation the governance rules. If I can briefly address the governance rules, it is fundamental if you're going to join an organisation which is established under legislation and has a particular way in which it does its business, to be more than just familiar with its governance rules, but to be absolutely conversant with them, to understand how meetings are conducted, to understand how pre-meetings are conducted, and to understand the statutory basis and statutory power that you hold when you attend such meetings. I want to absolutely endorse the comments of Mr Boardman that as we return to an elected council, that understanding the governance rules, not just being familiar with them, but absolutely understanding them, understanding how they function within local government and what power is you have at a council meeting, is a fundamental part of being a councillor. And if you intend to stand for local government, reading these now and showing that commitment is one way of being best placed to best represent the community. I note that the manner in which it's presented in the papers tonight provides both a tracked changes version, so you can clearly see where those changes have been undertaken to adopt recommendations from Operation Sandon, and there's also a further clean copy which is a little easier to follow. But I absolutely want to invite not just those members of the community who are interested in standing for local government, but all members of the community to become engaged with this document and to understand how local government meetings are conducted. With respect to the other suite of documents that this report addresses, again, there are a number here which are critical to you if you have any intention of standing for local government. Both those being the council expenses policy and the councillor gift policy. And again, the continuing review of these sorts of documents is part of the work that we have undertaken as a panel to ensure that the documents are up to date and that we are maintaining best practice with respect to how we do our job as administrators. I also want to note that there is an unreasonable complaint conduct policy, which is an important policy for council to maintain and to maintain in an up-to-date manner, so that council officers are always aware of the steps that they can take in the way that they engage with the community, and that the community also knows that there are boundaries within which they can engage with council, and to ensure that at all times they're doing it in a manner which is reasonable, because if it's not, there is a method by which council can create a register of unreasonable complainants. And this is not an unusual step. It's something that can be done. It'll be done in a very careful manner, as it's set out in the unreasonable complaint conduct policy. But again, it's important to ensure that council officers are always able to deal with their important work and to not be distracted, if I can use that expression, by ongoing complaints that are unreasonable in nature. And finally, I also want to note the Buildings and Works Code of Practice, which is included in these suite of documents. This is a growing municipality. There's always building and construction going on in the city of Casey, and I want to endorse the update to the Buildings and Works Code of Practice, and to ensure that it is up to date, it's compliant with all building regulations, and when you see when you're walking past the building site and you see those boards on the side of it which tell you who's conducting the site, where the nearest hospital is, well, this is the reason why it's there. It's because at Casey we're ensuring at all times we are ensuring compliance with building regulations and ensuring that our suite of documents are up to date. And with those comments, and again with the invitation to the community to engage with the draft governance rules, I second this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. I think it's fair to say that this community has an absolute right to respect the highest level of integrity and accountability in the newly elected council come October of this year. And in the absence of the state government, including in the reforms as you identified, Mr. Boardman, model governance rules, it is incumbent on us to include the recommendations from IBAC to ensure that the very detailed, as a matter of fact, very detailed procedures and processes that councillors must engage in their decision-making processes really aim to strengthen that leadership and capability to set the highest standards of integrity and accountability. So it will be incumbent on those people that will be subject to decision-making with those governance rules to adhere to those processes and be accountable to this Casey community for that. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. We now move to item 5.7, which is section 11A, Instrument of Authorisation under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I'll move that motion.
It's on page 446. Thank you, Mr. Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconder, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. This is a motion of the type we often pass with respect to ensuring that the correct delegations are held by council officers when exercising their authority under the Planning and Environment Act. I don't really need to say much more than that. I want to again thank the members of staff who undertake the important task of ensuring that the correct delegated authorities are held by officers who are making statutory decisions. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman.
Chair, nothing to add. Likewise, I acknowledge all the staff and their contribution to the organisation that are named in the report.
I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. And the final item this afternoon is item 5.8, which is the procurement of renewable energy.
Chair, I'll move that recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. And
Yes,
a seconder?
I'll second it.
Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman.
Thank you, Chair. This is in part a statutory obligation as well as a common sense approach. This organisation, like all local government organisations, has an obligation a statutory obligation, I should point out, to achieve net zero emissions through its activities by 2030. And we have adopted a number of policies in the past that have been precursors to achieving that, and to ensure that we approach it not just from statutory compliance obligations, but also from a fiscal sensibility perspective, but also looking at where the realities from infrastructure and a market approach are. And I note that in 2020, it was actually the Darebin City Council that led an initiative to look at forming an organisation called the Victorian Energy Collaboration, which effectively became the largest buying group in the local government sector, I believe nationwide, to really give market parity and scale on how an organisation such as Casey and other municipalities could meet their objectives and look at alternative energy supply agreements that focused on the transition away from traditional fossil fuel sources to renewables and the associated infrastructure mix. Casey joined that organisation in October 2023, with a view to looking at the specifics around what the market realities were. And in February of this year, we or endorsement was sought from the organisation to conduct a financial assessment to look at the various options under that particular collaboration, and an appropriate consultant was formed, or appointed, I should say. There was a number of alternatives that were considered and costed as part of this analysis. There was certainly a business as usual type of approach, which would have been continuing the current contractual arrangements at scale across the local government sector, utilising current fossil fuel traditional sources of energy. The reality was that with the volatility set by the Australian energy market operator around the different sources of energy mix, and particularly the infrastructure issues around the states having to, at times, source energy from each other because of infrastructure and other limitations, that particular option in a longer term environment could have increased our energy costs by $3.5 million a year. That is based upon the historical economic analysis, which is not just something which is affecting every householder in this municipality in the state, but arguably is affecting everyone in the country. It is not an approach which would provide any certainty or consistency, and one that would certainly not meet our obligations under our 2030 emissions reduction target. There was also a consideration of looking at voluntary large-scale generation certificates. That was a supplementation to the existing energy mix, one which is effectively an offset type of category. There was also an option to look at Casey itself being a provider of infrastructure through solar farms and other renewable energy mixes. In the end, the option really was, without question, to go down the VECO 2.0 approach, which is the collaboration that I've previously mentioned, which is looking at effectively a large buying group sourcing renewable energy through an agreed price parity that's been provided by Red Energy and the Snowy Hydro Group, but most importantly entering into a longer term contract through a single preferred supplier arrangement that not only meets our emissions reduction obligations but also provides certainty and clarity from an economic perspective into the future. What surprised me the most by going down this option was that the additional costs, considering the significant energy consumption of this organisation across all of its business units, the additional annual cost was only $340,000 per year. So in the longer term, there's quite a significant savings compared with the market volatility and the baseload variable costs that are currently provided through existing infrastructure. So therefore, it really did not, it was a no-brainer to go down this particular pathway. It also means that we achieve our net zero ambitions potentially as early as next year. And I think that overall is a significantly good story. So the analysis that's gone into looking at changing the way this organisation purchases our power, based upon our statutory obligations, but also consistent with the other policies that we previously adopted, this overall, to me, is a very good news story for the organisation and the municipality as a whole. We've provided significant detail in the report around what the analysis is. Of course, the consultant's report remains a confidential attachment. There are some commercial and confidence aspects which are relevant in the circumstances, but having reviewed thoroughly the analysis, the policy considerations, the consistency with other policies that we have previously adopted as mentioned, and the financial and economic impact, I wholeheartedly endorse this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. This is one of these motions which or one of these sets of council documents which on first blush might seem a little bit of of a dry, humourless topic, but it is actually one in which real a substantial change can be achieved towards our continuing drive towards reducing our carbon footprint. I note that we joined this buying group in October 2023, and since that time we've undertaken this work to analyse how we can best meet our continuing requirement to be compliant with our goal of net zero. I've considered the confidential attachment to the documents, and I note that VECO 2 has been recommended to us, and in particular I note that in undertaking the proposition provided by VECO 2, we are undertaking a change which will provide a partial shield against variable and potentially even higher prices in the energy market. It'll provide protection against price uncertainty, and it's further enhanced by the cap and also by a floor. I note also that no minimum power consumption requirements, allowing council to pursue further energy saving strategies in line with the adopted environment strategy and climate action plan. And finally, I note that the offer compromises a single retail electricity supply agreement for each council across all the market categories, which enable flexibility for councils to add a further market category or accounts that were not originally committed to the project. Ultimately, as has been addressed by Mr. Boardman, I note that the cost, which is the additional cost, is one which we can bear, but also one which ensures, as I've set out in my early comments, we are shielded against variable prices to some degree, and potentially even higher prices. And I want to thank those members of council who have undertaken this important work, and in ensuring that we are carefully using council resources, while at the same time doing the important work we need to do to ensure our compliance with our environment strategy and our climate action plan. And with those comments, I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Very comprehensive piece of work from James Collins and Michael Jansen and their teams. Appreciate I think what is a very clever approach to this that puts the council in a very strong position going forward. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. That concludes officer reports this afternoon. I move to item 6, consideration of reports of committees, and simply note the record of discussion as listed in the agenda papers. Item 7, petitions, there are none. Item 8, late reports, there are none. Item 9, urgent business, none for consideration. Item 10, closed council, no items for consideration. So I declare the meeting closed. Thank all of you who've participated from the gallery this afternoon, and bid you good evening.